Okay, today I figured I'd make an updated video for modular design. I've tried to do this a few times and I can't say that I've actually quite captured what I'd like to. But what I'm going to do first is just get right into it. I'm going to show you my settings and then I'll explain it after, okay? So I usually come up here, go to unit setup, I make sure that whatever I'm aiming to um, use for scale, whether it be in this or a game engine. Usually you aim for the game engine because if you're importing assets, that's where they're going to go. The one I'm going to be importing into uses one Unreal unit equals 1 centimeter. So metric centimeters, cool. We're not done. Make sure this is 1 unit equals 1 centimeter. Okay. And you can even come down here. You can change this to whatever you want as long as it equals 1 centimeter. Okay. So that being done, I then come up here to snaps. And depending on what you need, you may or may not need these, but just make sure that you know what you're doing and you should be able to, like angle snap, definitely would want that. Percent snap, um, spinner snap toggle. I don't think I've ever had to use that, but again, if you need them, right click, go under grid and snap settings. I usually use grid points and vertex, and I use this at times. Keep in mind that sometimes these will conflict with each other. So, check them on and off as needed to get the desired result. Then here, these are the defaults for 3ds Max. I change them because it's going to be a power of 2 that the game engine is using. I'm not importing these into the newer Unreal Engine. It's actually for an older one. And I like to put 64 for the view of the grid. All right. So that's all set. You also want to make sure you select with this. Try not to do it with this because you can move things around, warp models, vertices, things like that. And just to prevent that, only select with this here. And only when you're ready to move, do that. Okay. Very, very helpful piece of advice. So now what I'm going to do, and since we have the unit set up, we have these snapped, we have that taken care of. I'm going to make a box real quick. And don't worry if you don't make it big enough, you could always resize it. That's what's good about this. So I usually start off small, right? So what I'm going to do here, and again, the reason it's saying 16 by 16 is because each one of these squares is actually 8 centimeters. Okay, so let me go back to this real quick. So grid spacing. So each space, which is one of these squares, 8 centimeters. Major lines every nth grid line. So that would be basically these right here. Okay, that's 16 of these 8 centimeter blocks. Okay, just so it's reference. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually turn this into 32 by 32 all across. Now, notice how it's still fitting the grid though, right? Because I've basically set up the units perfectly so that no matter what I do here, and if I do it manually, it's going to snap as long as I go to the power of 2. So that being done, another thing I want to do real quick is kind of show off the edge faces. And this part here, I use 4 by 4 by 4. I use it just for reference. I use it for visual reference, just to kind of show you exactly what I mean about everything being the power of 2 and how good this will work. So this is just showing you. Obviously, it's following the grid. Now there might be like games where you actually have to do this to the model if it has like vertex lighting, but you also want to triangulate each polygon to make sure that the shadows go across it properly. Now, if you don't know what vertex lighting is, it's the old way of doing things. You can look into it, and you'll see why triangles are mentioned. It's basically just 3 points of a can't even think of the term for it. We'll just say triangle polygon. I know it's horrible. I butchered it. But basically, like across here, you'll have these little dotted lines in 3ds Max when you go to try to change or um, I forgot what they called it, triangulate, and you'll see them once you go into triangulate mode. But basically, that's what it goes by. So anyway, as you can see, it fits, right? So I can make this bigger, smaller. I like to do this just for visual reference while I'm creating. And then before I export, I usually get rid of that. Like all the lines that I don't need. I optimize it the best I can. So there's that. Very simple, not complicated at all, really. You just have to make sure you have your snaps on. And then when you're creating something like this, see how that's still selected? Press escape. You can go in here. Again, I would always advise that you do this non-destructively. And by that, I mean, basically don't just apply every change immediately onto the model and collapse it with the layer stack. This is the layer stack. So when you collapse it, collapse all, it'll go all into this right here. Okay, that's what it's going to turn into. Now, you also want to make sure, obviously, you do your UV unwrapping, and then I would add another edit poly before you export it, whatever model it is. But this is the setup. Okay, very simple in 3ds Max. Now in Blender, it's a little different. And still, I'm new to it, so it's kind of hard for me to figure this out as I go. But I think I figured out a way to set up the same type of setup here. Now let me just make one more box quick, just for the sake of what I'm about to show you in Blender. Okay, so right, we'll take off that. We'll just do one because it's just right. So this obviously is 8 centimeters. Okay, and here's the grid. And notice how I have this snapping, right? So if I wanted to make another box real quick, right? Pretty simple. Now you're probably figuring, asking, how are you doing this in Blender? How can I do this in Blender? Well, let me show you. So I set this up already to kind of show you that it can be done. 8 centimeters across, obviously. So there's a lot of videos out there that will tell you all sorts of things. And what I've noticed is that it's really going to be trial and error. It should be straightforward, and I guess once you do this enough, it will be. But what I did to do this was basically we already had like a cube in here. Now, what I had to figure out was this is for the grid itself. And when you go to units, right, you see this, right? I made sure this was 1. And I make sure the scale here was 0.080. Okay. Because basically, power of 2, that is going to represent, I want 8 centimeters, okay, across each side. So that's what, okay, this is matching that. The grid is matching this. This is going to be 1, right? Now you're figuring, okay, so how did you get the 8 centimeters across on all sides? Well, I had to come down here to scale 0.040. Don't ask me why they do it this way. It can be confusing, especially when you're just trying to figure things out mathematically. So this is something I don't really care for in Blender. Like Blender obviously does things differently. I don't know if they just do it because they can, or if there's like legal reasons why they can't really just copy another program. But you can do the same thing. So now you're probably wondering, well, how did you get the pivot there? Well, if I remember correctly, yeah, see, it's so small, you're not going to be able to see it. But if this was way bigger, which is what I started off with, you would go to a vertice, right? Highlight a vertice in modeling mode. Okay. And I believe snap selection to cursor. I think that's what it was right here. So basically what would happen is no, let me double check. Sorry about this. Like I said, I'm still new. Where was I? Okay. So cursor to selected, my bad. So you want to select this, and what's going to happen is the cursor is going to go right to that vertice, but you're not done. So once you do that, and you have to be in modeling mode, you want to go back to layout. Okay. And that's where it's going to show this. Like if it was bigger, it would still show this, but you'd be, more zoomed in. Then you want to go to object, set origin. Okay. And so what was it? Origin to 3D cursor. And that's where this is. Okay. And it's going to snap it there. And once you do that, right, let's say I want to move this real quick. See how it's moving with the object now, and it isn't like it moves the object and then this goes back to that. Depending on what setting you have, that can happen. So like I said, just mess around. If you have to, look up some videos to better understand how the pivot works. But see, now it's moving across, right? Awesome. Well, you know how I made the box in 3ds Max and I used one of these? Okay, so when you select this, by snap to is going to be geometry by default, which is weird because here's the default, but yet it keeps picking this. Another weird thing in this program. I make sure it's on default. And so what's happening now is that it understands this is where I want it to snap. Okay, so done. just like this right here. Okay. And I added this here. I forgot how I did it, but I wanted to make sure I could see all points. And the reason for this, again, if you have to move it up and down, that's perfect to do that because then you can see that it's still against it as you do it, right? And you want to make sure that you select the arrows, okay? And you want to make sure snaps are on. Another thing that I did under snap, um, absolute grid snap when I use increment. I should have probably put that out already. You can snap to different things, but I do increment because I'm trying to snap to the grid. So increment being the ruler of the grid. So that's how I do that. And I'm able to go up and down, side to side, whatever. And it will always do it from this pivot point. So once you know how to move the pivot point, make it so it's solid there and then move it back and forth, you're basically doing the same thing as 3ds Max. And like I said, this can be done in Maya and other programs. They have this ability. I personally don't know how to do it in Maya yet. I'm still trying to learn that program. But since so many people use Blender who don't have access to these, big time 3D modeling programs, or let's say you have a trial, but you're just sick and tired of having to either pay for it monthly or yearly, or you just don't have the money or whatever reason, and you want to learn it in Blender, this is how you do it. Now, I also even changed some of the hotkeys to match 3ds Max. So let me see if I can find that real quick. I believe it was under preferences. Uh, Navigation. Key map. Okay, so um middle mouse action, pan, right? So instead of orbit, I put pan. So when I just select that, bam, it moves, right? And I believe there was another one. Oh, geez. I know it was in here somewhere. Maybe it was navigation. I know it's one of these. And basically, this would be for the rotate aspect here. It's really odd. I can't remember exactly what I did, but you can look this up and they'll tell you what to do. So just look up like 3ds Max controls in Blender, right? And you'll eventually find a video where a guy talks about how to do this exact thing. Let me see if the key binding. That was the same thing. It's weird. Let me see if I can find rotate. Okay, here. No, that's um yeah, that's not it. All right, let's see. Rotate view. Okay, right here. Under 3D view, rotate view. And so you want to make sure it's on mouse. And then when you select this, this is what you do. Press a key, press Alt, and then press middle mouse. Okay. And that's going to make it so that when you do this, um, hold on, right? Now it moves the way you want it to. I'm sorry this is so small and it's having an issue doing that, but it is only 8 centimeters. But that's how you do it. Now these over here, you know how the other grid lines I had it every 16. I haven't figured out exactly how to change that. It always seems to be 10, but it doesn't really matter. You're just trying to build your models so that they match whatever setup or measurements you have, and you want to make sure everything snaps and all that. So hopefully this is helpful. Again, I would advise that if you don't understand something in a program or how to do it, first thing you should always learn is how to use the tool, right? And how to use it properly. So if you're confused about pivot points in this, you're not alone. I'm still having issues with it. I'm lucky that I was able to get this far showing you, but that's just basically what you do in another program to set up your modular environment. So thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you guys later.